Gazing out the window, 23-year-old Vicky Martin found herself in complete bliss. She was driving down an old country road in western Kansas with her newly wedded husband, Bert, and she felt as if the scene she was living in was all too perfect. They had been driving to their honeymoon in Las Vegas from Kansas City and were on the second day of their trip, and as they progressed through the vast, empty road, Bert began to realize they would need to stop for gas soon. Vicky tried to search her phone for a nearby gas station, but her phone got no cell service, so they decided to pull off at the first town they saw. About 30 minutes later, they began to lose hope, but soon saw a sign welcoming them to a quaint town of Wallace, Kansas. Population 200. Vicky and Bert's feelings of relief were quickly tainted as they realized that no one was to be seen. They parked their car and decided to walk to find help, but every store they wandered in was empty. The last place they thought to check was an old church that they thought was the largest building in town by far. But when Bert pushed open the rusted door, the only thing he was met with was an abundance of dust bunnies. Vicky tells Bert she has an eerie feeling and wants to leave the town with the little gas they have left, but Bert insists on trying to find help a little longer since this is the last town they'll see until Colorado. Vicky pushes Bert towards the exit of the church and he agrees to leave after much persuasion from Vicky. But as they shove through the doors to the outside world, they are met with a group of young children. Bert noticed the oddness of the town before, but he never really noticed it until the citizens were standing right in front of him. The whole town consisted of 7 or 8 buildings in total, all of which were clearly built in the 1800s. He began to notice a change of weather from when they first arrived. The once cloudless spring day was now turned into a gray, murky winter afternoon. He gazed over at Vicky as the atmosphere of the children began to touch her, and he turned his head to meet the eyes of the children. The children were no older than 13, and they seemed to accurately represent the odd town with their Amish attire. The tallest boy by far had his eyes locked on Bert, and as he looked back at the boy, a lifeless smile spread across his face, and he lifted a jackknife. Bert and Vicky turned to run, but before the screams erupted from their lips, Bert noticed that Vicky was nowhere to be found.
Bert runs down the dark alley, trying to escape the boy with the jackknife in his hand. Bert flees into the cornfield, hoping to find a place to hide. He tries to catch his breath as he ducks down behind the tall corn stalks. A few minutes pass in total silence, and Bert believes the little boy lost his tracks. He decides to walk deeper into the fields, hoping to find Vicky along the way. His path is lit by the pale moon, and he starts to notice how picture-perfect the corn is. There isn't a single brown spot on any of the corn stalks. The ground is clear of weeds and broken stalks, and the only noise is the soft crunch of grass under Bert's feet. It seems as though the field is frozen in time. Bert starts to get an eerie feeling in his stomach and decides to turn back. Bert tries to go back the way he came, but each stalk is the same, and he begins to walk in circles. He finally sees barren ground in front of him, and he rushes towards the exit at the edge of the cornfield. But what he found wasn't the edge of the cornfield. Right in the middle of the barren ground stood a small and limp tree. A person with blonde hair seemed to be leaning against the tree. "Vicky, is that you?" Bert rushes toward the tree and says, "Oh, Vicky, I'm so happy I found you." Bert reaches out his hand to grab her shoulder to wake her up, but she falls over. Bert jerks back. Vicky was wrapped in barbed wire and had a corn husk shoved in her mouth. Her eyes were gone. Blood dripped down her face like tears. Bert didn't have time to mourn his loss because suddenly he heard footsteps behind him. The kids from earlier were only a few feet behind him. Bert runs into the field again before they can grab him. He runs in every direction, but he can't seem to find the end of the maze. Instead, it seems like the fields are closing in on him. The paths between the stalks are getting narrower as he runs, and he starts to hear loud footsteps behind him. He realizes something is following him. "Get away, whoever you are!" Bert trips over his feet and falls to the ground. He tries to get up, but his foot is stuck on something. He looks down and sees a cornstalk tightening around his ankle. He quickly breaks its hold, but soon his other leg is tied up. He realizes that he is not going to make it out of the field alive. He violently twists and turns his body, but the stalks make it impossible for him to move. "Help! Someone help me!" The kids reappear in front of him and start chanting words he cannot understand. The stalks make their way to his chest. He tries to call for help once more, but the corn wraps itself around his mouth. The stalks rise above him and fall in on him. The kids clap and release cries of joy. They look up to the sky. The moon is now dark red. "How beautiful is the harvest moon," says one of the children. Suddenly, lightning strikes, and the corn starts to grow taller and wraps itself around the children. The children are startled and shout out, "Why are you doing this to us? We always do what you tell us. We even brought you a sacrifice today." The corn engulfed the children. All was quiet in the fields. The corn swayed in the soft breeze, waiting for the next victim to come into the field.